When people think about FMW, the first person that comes to mind for most is Atsushi Onita. When you think of Onita, the first thing you think of is FMW. The two things are intertwined for most, and the success of FMW was a catalyst for what became a revolution of smaller promotions opening up in Japan and a golden age taking place. Onita was able to gain a cult following the likes of which hadn't been seen in wrestling at that point. And with that following, Atsushi Onita was able to become far more than a wrestler with the big name. Onita became a symbol. Onita would always have an inner struggle as he saw himself on the level of top stars of the wrestling industry, but he could just never get himself viewed that way by the greater wrestling public. Onita was helping out other promotions at the time and trying to raise his profile by being exposed to new crowds. But even then, Onita was just not getting the results he believed he should. Onita would have to take his place in the upper echelon by defeating a man who was already recognized as a legend. And the man who he would choose for this spot was the legend, Terry Funk. It doesn't get any more legendary than a man from the Double Cross Ranch, and Onita knew this. The idea was to have a big match at Kawasaki Stadium against the legend in one of Onita's signature exploding barbed wire bouts he had pioneered. But this time, he wanted the entire ring to explode. In securing Funk for the bout, the first hiccup would come with Funk wanting to get clearance from Giant Baba. Funk had not worked for Baba very much around this time, but you will notice that many who worked for Giant Baba would have a loyalty to him where they felt that asking permission to work other shows was fair. He was just that respected by the men who worked for him. Luckily for Onita and FMW, Giant Baba gave the go-ahead, though it was never really in question, as Baba didn't have the reputation to say no to such requests that were given so respectfully. With the opponent secured, you would think things were pretty much set in stone, but that was far from the case. The build of the match began insanely as Onita almost literally died. During a big street fight, he would accidentally end up swallowing barbed wire and causing himself serious injury and nearly suffocated to death due to not being able to breathe. The big Kawasaki Stadium show was in jeopardy already, but after several surgeries, Onita was able to get healthy enough to return before the stadium show. All of the events were lining up to be working in Onita's favor, but the tickets still had to sell well. Fortune smiled upon Onita again as he was able to draw over 50,000 people to Kawasaki Stadium. The mystique of the exploding barbed wire death matches had drawn so well, the idea of blowing up the entire ring had many people ready to see a spectacle like they've never seen before. Another element of the draw is that at this point, Terry Funk is a new commodity to the deathmatch world. He was one of the few legends who were early adopters to the style, so his impact on drawing the house cannot be understated. Like most things with FMW, this was another perfect storm of factors coming together. Another perfect storm brewing was that the Wing Group had begun winning awards and their wrestlers were now ranking as the most popular wrestlers in the magazines. The Wing Group was never able to take over in a real meaningful way, but Onita, seeing how his own company managed to rise to its spot, knew that he had to keep raising the bar to make sure to keep the FMW name above the wing branding. The exploding ring was just the type of idea to do just that. Walking into Kawasaki that day, Onita couldn't have possibly known the history he was about to make. But knowing Onita, maybe he did. The undercard was packed with an eclectic collection of matches with representatives from many different companies, ranging from women's encounters all the way to seeing former boxer Leon Spinks against Olympic judo champion Grigory Verchev. One criticism FMW had at this time that it's hard to fight off is that they were a one-match show. They would book a full card, but most people were only there for maybe one or maybe two matches. This is usually a bad sign, but it always seemed to work for FMW during the early Onita years. When the time comes for the main event, we are shown shots of Onita backstage pondering what is to come. The match has been billed up as the most dangerous thing possible, and maybe even a life or death situation. The crowd was incredibly hot for this match to take place, and when Wild Thing played over the speakers, the crowd went ballistic, cheering Onita all the way to the ring. This was his moment to take his place amongst the immortals, and he knew it. But this time, the audience knew it too. Several announcements were made before the bout, and stares were exchanged between Funk and Onita. The rules were set as the match would go as long as needed, but at the 15-minute mark, the bombs would go off. In addition to that, there were also exploding charges on the barbed wire if you were thrown into it. This was set to be a match like no other, and as it began, both men tried to immediately push each other into the barbed wire. As expected, Onita was the first to feel the exploding charge of the barbed wire. Much of the early going is spent doing barbed wire teases with spots of brawling and mostly Terry Funk offense. Funk's lead would be taken away, however, when Onita managed to reverse into a suplex and soon after send Funk into the exploding barbed wire for him to get his first taste of Onita's creation. The match gets much more even at this point, and Onita is able to mount some offense and do some damage to the Funker. However, after attempting one too many of his signature headbutts, Funk was able to counter it into a throw through the barbed wire and onto the floor, causing Onita to slice up not only his back, but his hand pretty badly as well. Onita gets back into the ring and Funk continues the brawling right as an alarm begins to sound, sending the crowd into a panic. One thing easy to see in hindsight, they probably could have had this alarm sound off for the last minute or two instead of a full 5 minutes of alarms going off. Be that as it may, the match continues with Funk and Onita brawling and trying to take out the other man. Funk would manage to get Onita in his signature spinning toe hold, only for Onita to reverse it and send Funk flying into the exploding barbed wire. As Funk began wobbling back to the center of the ring, getting his footing, Onita would rush him and land a jumping DDT and cover Funk for the 3 count. He had won. Onita had finally defeated a certified legend. After the bout, however, Onita would continue his attack, landing blow after blow, and then finally grabbing Terry Funk and hitting him with his Fire Thunder power bomb to leave him laying and the bombs to take him. Onita takes his leave from the ring as the alarms ramp up, but then something happens. As Onita is leaving and there's only 10 seconds left, he dives back into the ring and attempts to wake up Terry Funk and pull him to the outside. When this won't work, Onita throws himself on top of Terry Funk to protect him from the explosion. As the smoke clears out, you see Onita clutching the body of Funk and him trying to help the fallen legend up to his feet. The visual is iconic, and one that is still shown in many retrospectives today. Seeing a torch being genuinely passed is a rare thing, and on this one occasion, it seemed perfectly done.
Someone to hear your prayers, someone who cares. You're wrong, personal, Jesus. Someone to hear your prayers, someone who's there. Reach out, touch faith.
The show was a financial and critical success, and even though the explosion wasn't as grand as it would be in later years, the fans were still taken in with the spectacle of it all, and with Onita himself. The match would go down in history, and is one of the most seen matches FMW ever put on. Many people have many different opinions of Onita and how his career would go after this night. There is one thing there is no debate on, however. On May the 5th, 1993, Onita set out to achieve the goal of becoming a legend, and on that day, the Wild Thing earned his place among the immortals.